Hi, Mike Matchett with Small World Big Data, and today we're going to talk about something that everyone really should be thinking more about, which is responsible AI. What does it take to make the computer, the big computer in the sky that's running all that artificial intelligence, responsible? Today we're talking with Expert.AI. This is a firm that we're going to dive a little bit more into here with their CEO, Walt Mayo, in just a second. Let's dive into it. Welcome, Walt.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
All right, Expert.AI, just at the top level, we're focusing on language data here. Tell us a little bit about Expert.AI and how you got to looking at that problem.
So Expert.AI from its inception some long time ago has uniquely focused on the challenge of how you apply technology to this pervasive, ubiquitous, but extraordinarily complex form of data called language, right? And it's the data form that surrounds and powers the human condition. It's how we receive and impart information. And until fairly recently, it really hasn't been tractable with technology. And so what we do is we bring a broad variety of techniques that enable you to transform language into data, generally described as natural language processing, natural language understanding, to power any application or process so that humans can make better decisions and companies can make or save money.
All right, so we look at this great amount of big data that's out there in the world. We talk a lot about the volume of unstructured data, but here we're specifically saying, look, a lot of that unstructured data is in the form of language, whether it's written, text, documents, dictation, text to speech or speech to text. I would have to say, and maybe agree with you, that a lot of that's not being exploited to its fullest extent today, right? A lot of it is just stored and maybe extracted a little bit about it. Do you guys see a big opportunity there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of intuitive for all of us in the digital workplace with pretty simple exercises where you get a bunch of information that comes back to you, and it's still a real challenge. When you get into any level, there's really two challenges, right? One is where there's a level of complexity, and the complexity in language typically requires experts. So think of like a contract. You have to have a lawyer look at that because they're highly trained, right? The challenge is that they're relatively expensive, and there's a fair degree of variability, not only across a peer group of professional experts at a given domain, but with a single expert over time. You can give them the same document on Monday and give it to them again 2 weeks later. And the insights that are derived from it, the data that's extracted from it, is meaningfully different, right? So that's one. So complexity is a big problem. The other one is the sheer volume. You know, who would have thought that the information revolution would result in more pictures being taken than any point in human history, right? Well, we're also generating more language than we've ever generated before, right? And so the customer who comes in and has a poor experience and lets not just his friends and neighbors know about it, but potentially hundreds of thousands of people, that's information that you want to be able to get to. It's very hard until you develop a scalable, tractable approach, and that's what we bring to the enterprise.
All right, so Expert AI's platform really focused on natural language processing, as you said, natural language understanding. There's a whole lot of technologies in there which we will not have time in the next 5 hours to dig into because there's just about everything under the sun. But what you do for customers is help them get to a solution that's based on natural language that is efficient. I think you said tractable and a couple other keywords, and really deliver that customer's a value extraction out of their natural language documents or corpus or whatever it is they have.
Sure. So when you think about the kind of range of cases, right, there's the information that is coming from outside of your enterprise that's relevant to your goods or services, or your reputation for that matter, right? So what customers are saying about you, what your suppliers are doing. There's information that's coming from the outside trying to get to the right part of your enterprise, right? So customers who are reaching out and they have a problem or a challenge. And then within the enterprise, typically there's a host of processes that are language driven. And essentially what we do is we embed the knowledge of the business users, the subject matter experts who are dealing with that language, and then we provide it to them in a way that ensures that the most relevant, most important elements will always be available and enabling them to be a lot more productive and make better decisions ultimately.
All right. And that's really what it's all about. Now, there's something that you are a proponent of, and I believe that you would say Expert AI is a leading example of, and that is responsible AI, which is AI that's not gonna do bad things to the public. It's not going to learn how to be racist or misogynistic. It's not going to. It's got a couple of key things to it. Tell us about what's in the under the umbrella of responsibility. When you say responsible AI, what do you mean, really?
You start with a foundation, which is, can you reliably deliver your product and service in a way where you're accountable and you're responsible and your product and service delivers the value that you represent
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't have pernicious side effects. Right? So you can kind of start there. And at the one end, you can say, for example, pharmaceutical companies are subject to extraordinarily rigorous regimes of accountability because of the immediate implication that if a drug is provided to an individual, their life could depend on it. Then you go all the way to the fact that the stepladder that I have in my garage has some labels in it that say, please use this carefully, right? Because people have a tendency to fall off these things. And even though it seems reasonably straightforward, you'd be surprised at the silly things that people do, right? Well, there you go. So guilty as charged, right? And I actually took a modest tumble off my ladder doing something I clearly should not have done. Now, in between is the responsible standard that we believe AI should be held to, right? With a lot of the advances that have occurred in AI, in particular in the subdomain around deep learning, they raise some concerns. One is they're enormously energy intensive. In a world in which we've all seen the kind of impact of global climate change, to pursue a path that has a very, very documented record of rapidly doubling energy intensity as the best path to achieving a goal, it should at a minimum give pause. Right now, to the business, there's even a more direct reason for that. It's the compute cost, right? Because that energy intensity is driven by the fact that a lot of the deep learning approaches are run on GPUs. In fact, all of them are. And so your cloud bill is going to be rather staggering, right? So that's one.
Well, I can only imagine if somebody puts this in perspective of like Bitcoin and the Bitcoin mining costs and stuff, right?
Well,
Here we're designing cryptocurrencies to save a lot of things about society and to take us in the new future, and yet we can't afford it electricity wise and climate wise.
well, you have to take that into account as you look at the structure of the system that you're providing. And if you say, here's the benefit that we're going to provide by getting away from fiat currencies, for example, you have to also own up to the fact that it's enormously energy intensive.
Yeah.
And is that a sustainable model? Right. So that's one element of responsible AI. And another one is around the idea of explainability and transparency. If you don't understand how your technology is providing you with material decisions, you can't trust it because ultimately you'll be held accountable. And I can assure you, it is not a strong defense to say the algorithm told me to do it.
All right, so we've got plenty of examples of this, right? There's people who've
Yes.
written a lot about this. The algorithm that they've adopted, it's kind of blind. No one can totally explain what happens in a neural net or how it made its decision, but it's learning something that could be prejudicial, easily prejudicial. It could be life-threatening. It could be making decisions. If you're building an automatic car, a self-driving car, you can't explain why the car turned left instead of right sometimes, right? So explainability seems to be a core thing that people should be striving for.
Well, and we certainly believe that. And we built our approach to natural language understanding with explainability at its core. In any solution that you're adopting that's powered by our artificial intelligence, is there a point at which a human in the loop understands the core insights that are driving that decision and then agrees to go forward with them, right? If there is the famous black box, patterns that are emerging that are driving decisions and nobody is seeing them explicitly, we think that opens you up to very meaningful challenges, and that's extending to legislative administrative rules that have emerged in the EU, in California, and they're going to keep coming for sure.
Sure. Great book, Weapons of Math Destruction. If someone wants to look
Weapons of Math Destruction, put it forward very, very nicely.
For her speak. There's something else we talked to, and just real quickly explain what responsible AI has to do with toxicity. How can AI actually be toxic?
Yeah, so there's a couple levels of that, right? And there's a very specific element to toxicity in the natural language understanding and natural language processing world. And that's emerged in particular with the development of what are called large language models. And large language models are basically pursuing a path that say, if you provide enough examples of language as it's represented, then you can develop technology that can parrot that language back reasonably accurately. And when I say reasonably accurately, what I mean is it's syntactically and grammatically correct. Gary Marcus, who's a very thoughtful observer of natural language understanding, has written extensively about it. What you can end up, though, is with something that he described in technical terms is as a very fluent spouter of bullshit. And what you have there is the danger is because it's grammatically and syntactically correct, it sounds like somebody's writing it. People ascribe it more accuracy than it merits. An example that came up with one of these large language models, GPT-3, and that was produced by OpenAI. GPT-3 represented that it could actually do mathematical operations. And in response to a simple question, what is the number that precedes 1 million, said 900,099. Well, that sounds kind of accurate, but in fact, it's not, right? The number that precedes 1 million is 999,999, right? And it can similarly provide equally right sounding. Where it really goes off rail is because these models typically are using all or most of the entire content of the internet, they're getting all of the vile, misogynistic, racist sludge on the internet. And stochastically, randomly, that can emerge. And this is a real world example that we ran. Saif Hassani was a classically trained Persian musician, right? And then you say, what is the attribute associated with that, right? What is the category that falls into? And what comes back is politics, right? And politics, because Persian, that means Iran, and the only thing anyone cares about Iran is not a 1,000-year-old culture that's rich in musical, poetic, artistic achievement, but the fact that it's in the geopolitical world stage, right? Our technology said music. That's what it was about, right? That's an example of a subtle form of toxicity.
All right. And so we have big forms of that, small forms of that. And if you're not responsible AI, there's a bleak future involved possibly for you. So we have got a lot to cover here. Well, tell me if someone wants to learn more about responsible AI or says, I don't believe our company is really exploiting natural language processing to the level we could be, or we've got other machine learning attempts in progress, but they're not looking at the bulk of our data or the richness of our data. What would you steer them to? What resources would you point them at?
Well, for obvious and self-serving reasons, I'd say give us a call, right, or come by our website, and we're building out a broader representation of what we mean by responsible AI, and we'll have all that information. We should have that up on our website. What we're talking about is an approach that we call green glass as opposed to black box, right? So it should be both transparent and energy efficient. What I would say is, for any business owner, two takeaways that I would say is, one, if you have a language process, it's tractable with technology, and you should think about it that way. Two, you should also go in day one thinking about your responsibility to ensure that whatever solution you develop is consistent with the values of the company that you where you work, right? An HR organization that's coming up with a machine learning or AI assisted algorithm for hiring, right away, that should be kind of one of the very first questions you're asking. How exactly does it provide the matches and the filters that make our life easier?
Right. And what's basing the decisions on, and is that really defensible at the end when we figure it out?
Exactly. And if they, a rough rule of thumb, if they can't, if the technology provider can't explain it to you in words that you clearly understand, that's not good enough.
Not good enough. And I know we've seen that example a lot in lots of different cases here, even in governments and people evaluating school systems and the rest. It's come up a couple times here in recent history. But we've kind of run out of time here, Walt. Tell me just one last thing. Is language processing something that will become dynamic? Is this something that we will start to interface more directly with processes and services just talking? I mean, we've got Alexa, we've got all these other things out there.
Yeah, I think that element for sure is becoming increasingly ubiquitous, right? I think what you're going to find is in the everyday struggle that we have to wade through the massive language data to find the important elements that help us do our jobs better, you're also going to see a lot more technology that can assist, and we hope to be a big part of that.
All right. Check out Expert.AI. Look for material on responsible AI, regardless of what kind of AI machine learning project you're undertaking. Those all sound like great concepts. And if you are not, again, taking advantage of all your natural language opportunities, you might want to take a look at Expert.AI and what they can do for you. So thanks, Walt.
Super, Mike. Thank you. Appreciate your spending this time with me.
Okay. Take care.